everybody, it's Ebony Love, and I'm here with a video on the AccuQuilt system of fabric die cutters. I want to give you a tour of all their products. Come on! First up is the AccuQuilt Studio. This is the biggest die cutter that AccuQuilt makes, and it has a number of different components that I want to walk you through. First of all, this machine requires dedicated space in a studio. It fits comfortably on a 2-foot by 4-foot table in most cases, and it is definitely something that has to stay where you put it. It's pretty heavy to move around, so it's not something that you want to drag in and out of a room or underneath the shelf. So it really does require dedicated cutting space. It is fairly large. It's about 22 inches wide by about 32 inches wide, so it's pretty hefty. The parts that it uses is different from the parts that are used on the other pieces of equipment. The first thing that you'll notice is what's called a die tray. This is a large metal tray that is used to support the dies. Next up, you have the dies themselves. Now, AccuQuilt makes several sizes of dies. This is one size of the dies. This is a jumbo die. I forgot my my dies there for a second. This is a jumbo die, and it fits inside the tray. And then on top of the tray we have a piece of acrylic, which is the mat that goes on top. So how this would work to run fabric through the cutter is you take the die tray, the die board, your fabric on top, and then last the mat goes on top, and all of that gets run through the machine. It can run through from either side, so whether you're right or left-handed, you can run it through from either side, and it cuts up to 10 layers of regular cotton fabric. You can run other types of fabric through the machine, such as wool, fleece, felt. Where you do have to be a little bit careful is when you're using thicker fabrics. You do want to check the number of layers, but as I said, it will take up to 10 layers and cut in one pass. The biggest die that AccuQuilt makes, aside from the strip cutters, is a super giant die, and I'm going to show you this super giant die just to kind of give you an idea, and I'll show you this again when we get to the go, but you can really see that this is a very hefty die. All the dies are actually on a piece of wood with foam, and then the blades you can see on the back of the die, you can see the outline of the blades. These dies are about 1 inch thick, so when you get up to the larger dies, they do get to be a little bit hefty. So if you do have problems or trouble lifting things that are a little bit heavy, this machine might not be the right one for you if you do have problems lifting heavy things. So that's just something to look at. Next up, I want to take you through the go. Alright, this is the AccuQuilt Go. This is the portable version of AccuQuilt's fabric die cutters. It's quite a bit smaller than the AccuQuilt Studio, and it's still a fairly hefty machine, but still fairly easy to lift, and it's definitely portable. It's got a carrying case, it folds up nicely, and when you want to use it, you simply unfold the machine like so. So it's got the wings just like the Studio, but it is quite a bit smaller. One of the first things that I noticed about this machine is that it does not require a die tray. So the Studio, if you remember, I pointed out that it's got a pretty hefty metal tray to carry the dies. These dies go through on their own. So there's one less layer going through the machine. So this is an example of a die. these dies are actually in plastic, so you cannot see the die blades on the back of the board. So they're plastic, but there's still foam on the top with the dies encased in the foam. The mats are also different. If you recall, I pointed out that the Studio uses acrylic plexiglass mats, and these are a more flexible material. Now this is a translucent mat. AccuQuilt has actually changed their mat material to a gray and black one, but you can still find these some places until they sell out. But it's a very flexible piece of plastic, but it's the same principle. You take the die, you place it on the machine, you put your fabric on top, cover it with the mat, and then run that through. And again, it's still, whether you're left or right-handed, you can run it through from either side of the machine. Some of the big differences that you'll see, and I get this question a lot as to whether the dies between the Studio and the Go are compatible, and they're not. The AccuQuilt Go dies are about a 1/2 inch thick, so already there's a difference there. But I do want to see if I can give you a good comparison here, if you can see just the difference in thickness between these two dies. So Studio dies are definitely not going to go through the die, the Go die. But similarly, Studio owners cannot run the Go dies through the Studio. So there's the die tray to account for. There's a difference in the mat, the difference in the thickness between the two dies, and there just simply is not an adapter that AccuQuilt makes that would enable you to use Go dies on the Studio. The other difference is that aside from the strip cutters, this is the largest die that AccuQuilt makes for the Go, and it's I believe this is a 10 by 10 square. So in contrast, if I pull this out for you, this is the largest die for the Studio. So you can see that this die is nearly 4 times bigger than the largest Go die. So you're going to be able to cut considerably larger amount of fabric as you run through the die. So both the difference in layers of fabric, the Go can take up to 6 layers of fabric, just depending on what you're cutting. But you do have to be pretty careful and try it out layer by layer, because you don't want to not be able to crank things through your machine. So just that difference in size and the difference in number of layers is what gives the Studio its real volume cutting. So next I want to take you through the Baby Go, which is the t-shirt that I'm wearing and AccuQuilt's latest die cutting machine. Alright, here is Baby Go. I named my Baby Go Joe from Little Women, so it's Joe the Baby Go. And compared to Mama, if I can give you a comparison here, you can see that the Baby Go is really much smaller in size than the Big Mama Go. And that makes the Baby Go a really nice option for really nice portability. It weighs about 8 pounds, so it's pretty lightweight. It folds up just like the Go, and so this is going to fit into a much smaller footprint, and it does not require dedicated space. The Go also does not require dedicated space, but you do still need to have room on your table to cut, where this little guy is going to fit in a lot of other places. Now, because of the difference in width, although this is a Go machine, it cannot take all of the Go dies. So for example, the 10 by 10 dies will not fit through the Baby Go because she's about 10 inches wide, and that doesn't really leave you a lot of room. So the dies that you're going to find are the ones that are 6 inches wide. The length doesn't matter, but it's really the width. So any die that is 6 inches wide is going to be able to fit through the Baby Go. Now, even though this is a new machine, there are still a lot of dies that are compatible between the Baby Go and the original Go. So all of the applique dies are going to fit through, and then also AccuQuilt is coming out with newer strip cutters so that you get a narrower strip cutter that can run through the Baby Go. If you look on the AccuQuilt.com website, you will see a die compatibility chart between the Baby Go and the larger Go. But again, because Studio and Go are not interchangeable, you're not going to see a compatibility chart for those machines. So hopefully this was really helpful for you to understand the differences between all of the fabric cutters that AccuQuilt makes. Stay tuned for more information. Thank you!